What's going on, people? This is Jesse Veal from jesseveal.com, and I wanted to talk about the ADOS term, American Descendants of Slaves, which was created by Tone from Tone Talks and Yvette Carnell from Breaking Bad, two commentators on black issues within the YouTube community, right? And it was, I would say, was popularized by Tariq Nasheed. He's used the term a lot, and he's a pretty popular speaker and documentary filmmaker. So let's get into it, right? So ADOS, American Descendants of Slave, it's pretty much identifying black African who are descendants of slaves in the United States of America. And it is specifying based on lineage, based on that specific lineage, right? And there's been a lot of controversy on Twitter, social media, and I think that being an American descendant of slave, I do think that it is important to create this term because of the issues that we've been having here in the United States as American descendants of slaves. Now, I'm just going to go through the reasons why I think it's a good term to use, why I think it's a needed term to use based on the current situation. Number one is that, as American descendants of slaves, we specifically have a specific lineage and history that is different from other black people from the Caribbean, from other parts of the Americas, as well as from Africa and other areas around the world. As American descendants of slaves, we had to go through slavery. We fought in every war since the American Revolution. The most popular person to get killed, to have blood spilt in the American Revolution, is a African American descendant of slave. You understand? It's an ADOS. Okay. We fought in every war, and what you must understand is, besides black immigrants, right? Besides Hispanic immigrants, even American descendants of slaves have been here longer than 90% of the groups that are here in America. We've been here longer than most white groups that came, in the 1800s, in the early, 1900s as immigrants. We've been here longer than them. We fought in more wars than them, and we spilled more blood than them, and we have our ancestors whose bones are buried within this country. Now, so that I've talked about that, the lineage and the history and the things of those natures, how our ancestors, the free labor that our ancestors provided, it provided, it accounts for most of the wealth within this country. I mean, slaves were considered the most wealth, and the labor that we provided built this country, literally built the majority of this country from the ground up. The White House was built by slaves. Washington, D.C. was built by slaves, and it was designed by an African American descendant of slaves, right? You can look all this stuff up, So now, another reason why we must distinguish ourselves is because we have a group of black immigrants that are now coming into the United States, right? They're immigrating to the United States based off the work that our ancestors put in the civil rights era to allow them to be able to come to the United States, right? You have things that were specifically created for African descendants of slaves, like the Negro College Fund, like certain scholarships, you have all these different set-asides and programs, such as, what's it called, affirmative action, right? And you have all of these other groups, particularly, so for example, right, for affirmative action, you have a lot of white women and you have a lot of Hispanics that are benefiting from affirmative action, when initially that was meant for African descendants of slaves. Okay, and so you have a lot of Caucasian women that are benefiting. But things like the Negro College Fund that was meant for descendants of slaves, you have a lot of immigrants that are coming in and receiving those scholarships that are using our struggle while being African immigrants, you see. And last but not least, you have African immigrants that are coming in, you know, that are not African descendants of slaves, and they are siding with white supremacy. They are siding against African descendants of slaves politically and economically, while using our struggle to benefit, you see. So you have people like Joy Reid that are making disparaging comments about descendants of slaves. You have people like Roland Martin, who comes from immigrant parents, that are talking negatively about American descendants of slaves. Speakers like Jason Black, like Tariq Nasheed. Okay, you have African immigrants like Kamala Harris, who's made a career out of locking up black boys and black men, and locking up black woman parents, right? Who's making a career out of destroying and having very harsh policies in place, that are disproportionately affecting black American descendants of slaves. Okay, and so when you look at the population, you have about 37 plus American descendants of slaves, and you have about 2 to 3 million African immigrants. Okay, and so what you have is a minority of African immigrants on various levels and various industries and fields of life, whether it's politics, economics, film, you know, all of these different industries, education. You have people that don't understand the American descendant of slave experience, that are being put in positions of power over particular institutions, projects, areas within the industry, that are getting platforms to speak for us when they are not of us, and they don't understand us and our unique experience within the African American community, and that's problematic. You understand? You know, you have people like Roland Martin, who had at one point a big platform. People like Joy Reid, who has a big platform on the news, that are speaking for our people when they're not of our people. And last but not least, right, we are owed reparations as American descendants of slaves. We are owed reparations for slavery, for Jim Crow, for Iran-Contra, for, you know, the war against drugs, with the CIA pushing drugs into our community. You know, they owe us reparations for the FBI killing our leaders and destroying our black movements. They owe us reparations for the MOVE movement getting dynamite or explosives dropped on their black neighborhood. They owe reparations for all of the successful, thriving black Wall Streets like Tulsa, Oklahoma, that were destroyed by white supremacists. So we've had a consistent history of black people, American descendants of slaves, being sabotaged consistently from Reconstruction after slavery up until, you know, a couple 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, you know, because of the crack era and all of the different drugs being pushed on us. And other black people don't understand that history, and they're not a part of that history, specifically the slavery. But we can go into these other things that I mentioned throughout history as well. You understand? So that is why this new label, this new identifying term, that is why it must be, it is so necessary. It must be taken seriously, and it will be taken seriously. It is being taken seriously. You understand? Because we have to distinguish our struggle, our lineage, our history, and the things that us and our ancestors have experienced that separates us from any other group in America. You understand? Because, you know, and at the same time, when you look at it, all other groups have identifying terms that they can fall back on. You know, Nigerian Americans, black people that are Nigerian Americans, they can always call themselves Nigerian Americans. And you have that for all groups, whether it's Nigerian Americans, Ghanaian Americans, Zimbabwean Americans, or what have you. You know, the list goes on and on. You have Jamaican Americans, Haitian Americans, all of these other black groups, they have a term that is specific to them, their ancestors, their ancestry, you know, in a unique experience that they had. And we should have something that clearly defines that amongst us as American descendants of slaves. Because originally, the African American term that Jesse Jackson created in the 1980s or 90s, I believe that term was originally meant to be that. But now you do have African immigrants from all over the world that are piggybacking on this term. And, you know, especially people that are you know, that are in politics. So, you know, President Obama is one. You know, he's not an African descendant of slaves. And when you look at a lot of his critiques of the black community, you know, his critiques were specifically towards us. And, you know, it was pretty harsh critiques that, you know, he gave that were similar, you know, to what Bill Cosby gave, that, you know, black people were pissed off at Bill Cosby, but it was okay for Barack Obama to say those things, right? And so we must understand that we can ally with these people. You understand? These are our people as well, but it's a distinct difference based on those things, right? And so, you know, we could come to the table as allies, but I don't think those people could necessarily be our friend. But we can definitely unite under the banner of Pan-Africanism, just like whites unite under the banner of white supremacy, just like Asians unite under the banner of Pan-Asianism, right? You know, you still have internal conflicts between the groups from time to time, but when another group is endangering us from outside of the major black group, the total black collective, right? You know, that's when we come together and try to make things happen, and not just at times of a possible war with other groups, or, you know, but also, you know, allying where we can ally, doing business together first before going to other groups, you know, getting trade delegations and trade fairs and things of that nature. You understand? That's what we're looking at, and that's what we have to be realistic about in terms of doing things, because we see being that we have different ancestries and different experiences, we see things differently. You understand? We see things differently. We've had different experiences. Based on those different experiences, we see things differently. You see? And so it is imperative that we do have pride in our American ancestry and what we've done and accomplished as Americans. You know, the first millionaire, the first black millionaire, the first black billionaire are both African American. You see? And, you know, we've accomplished a lot of other things throughout history. You know, despite our lowly place within America, and despite all of the obstacles that we've had based on racism and white supremacy, we've still invented some of the most fantastic systems and inventions throughout human history, whether it's the air condition, whether, you know, it's the stoplight, many of the different agricultural inventions George Washington Carver created that are used to this day. You know, all of these different things that we created, that we've invented as African Americans, have helped humanity. And not to mention the music genres that we created, jazz, blues, you know, rock and roll, rhythm and blues, house music, you know, hip hop, of course, rap and hip hop. You know, all of these things that we created, that we've contributed to the world despite what we went through. You understand? So it's a very imperative that we understand and that we still cheer on the other black groups, and we try to ally with them where we can see eye to eye. But we also, it's very imperative to have this term ADOS, so that we have people that identify, that understand us and our struggle, that can represent us, that can speak on our behalf, and that, you know, can represent us in all areas of life, you know, all areas of all industries that it may pertain to, within the business world, within the political world, within the social justice world, etc., etc. And fine, I'm gonna say one more thing. You know, another reason why this is key to have this distinguishing factor, because we actually do have a small minority of African immigrants who are anti-black. They're anti-American descendants of slaves, right? And so, you know, there's this chick Lovey on social media. You know, there's this chick that who's an actress from UK that's supposed to be playing one of our great American descendants of slave heroes, Harriet Tubman. They found out that she was making anti-black comments about American descendants of slaves before she got that role. And, you know, even to some degree, you know, in Issa Rae, you know what I'm saying? And some of the people that are on her HBO show, Insecure, you know, the chick Molly, the chick that plays Molly on Insecure, she was saying how nobody helps African immigrants. Meanwhile, they're following the path and using the benefits that were meant for African descendants of slaves. But I digress. You know, I'll leave it on that note. Leave your comment, share, let me know what you thought. Let me know what your thoughts and comments are, and definitely hit the like button.